I think that, Mosab is the Palestinian who hates Palestinians. He's developed a lucrative career being able to lie about basic facts about this conflict. And so when he says Palestinians or Hamas, what he really means is all Arabs and all Muslims. In fact, I've seen that plain as day in his social media and talks. He thinks that all Muslims are terrorists. And so, this is credited to the point that he is actually credited to jailing what is called the Mandela, the Palestinian Mandela. Marwan Barghouti. This is a guy who he put in prison 20 years ago, who was marching side by side with Israeli peace activists denouncing Hamas killing civilians. So again, when we're looking at someone who's worked for Israeli intelligence, who spouts the same rhetoric as Israelis, who say Hamas, but what they really mean is all Palestinians, it's really hard to debate someone on the fundamental reality and the principles of, the facts of this conflict. Now, to your point, Piers, about what should they do about Hamas, I reject the premise of Israel's genocide. I'm not going to sit here and say, yes, Hamas is a terrorist organization and they need to be eradicated. Of course, that's not true. And I think that we can both agree.
What do you mean that's not
it's
true?
An impossible task. It's not true that something needs to be done about Hamas. I don't agree with that framework and the parameters of that debate.
Why?
Because Israel's been committing ethnic cleansing and genocidal policies against the Palestinians for 70
But Hamas literally
years.
has
and
a charter.
But
Abby, hang on. Hamas literally has a stated charter of the elimination of Israel. That is the purest personification of a publicly stated policy of genocide
that's not
I can
true,
imagine.
That's not true. Their revised charter says that they actually recognize the existence of the Israeli state among 1967 borders. That's the revised charter, and they actually make a political differentiation between Zionism and Judaism.
So
that's
when
the
their
actual
official
charter of
spokesman,
Hamas. So you keep pointing to a random spokesperson. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's not random. He's the official spokesman for Hamas, and he said literally 2 weeks after October the 7th, we are going to do this again and again and again. That is an existential genocidal threat to the existence of everyone in Israel. Clearly, said publicly on camera. He's brazen about it.
Look, I think that when you're comparing one guy and his statement to literally dozens of genocidal statements. Okay, but look at the official spokespeople of Israel, Piers, and look at the actual genocide they're committing. You cannot compare the two. It's a complete false equivalency. One guy is saying one thing, the other dozens of Israeli ministers and cabinet officials and public media personas on TV are saying one thing and actually doing it on the ground.
You would allow Hamas to stay in power?
On the ground. It's not up to me, Piers. Hamas is representative of a large sector.
You've been expressing many opinions.
But here's the thing.
What's your opinion?
Marwan Barghouti is the most popular unifying figure in Palestinian society. He would resoundingly win in an election against Hamas. So what this is about, this isn't about Hamas. This is about eliminating every faction of Palestinian resistance, peaceful or not. It is not about Hamas.
It's all about what Hamas did on October the 7th.
But Piers, I think we both know it's not. Because what is the military occupation founded upon? When did Hamas come into power? We know that this isn't just about Hamas. What was Israel doing in the West Bank the year prior to October 7th? They killed 500 Palestinians, 80 children. This is ethnic cleansing. This is a military occupation. As long as you have these policies in place, you will never get to the root of the violence, Piers.
All right, Mosab, there was an allegation there that you think all Muslims are terrorists. What's your response to what Abby Martin said?
Well, this is Abi's desperate attempt to discredit me. I am a man of the field. I fought against Hamas as part of legitimate intelligence organization, against savage group that were targeting civilians in suicide bombing attacks, waves of suicide bombing attacks that they killed people indiscriminately. So Abi today want me for some reason to apologize for saving human life, because my truth challenges her convenient truth. Abby does not have the authority. She's just a self-appointed low-grade journalist. How can you be a journalist and you call this a genocide, ethnic cleansing? And she just keep repeating ethnic cleansing, genocide, colonialism, etc. None of it is real, including Palestine. It's only in your head. None of it is existential. Palestine was never born. How can you free it? It was never there. It's just a colonial entity, and some people choose to make it into a national identity. And this parrot has been just repeating Hamas propaganda. Marwan Barghouti that she's talking about him, she never met him. I knew Marwan before he got to power. He is a criminal. He killed 5 people. He has blood on his hands. He cheated on his wife. He has a secret son that he never revealed it to the public. Of course, I can criticize him, and I can criticize all the criminals that I know personally. She's been there only for a visit, and maybe she had some falafel sandwich, you know, and she really was blown away of the Palestinian experience. There is no such a thing as Palestine. It's about time to retire, find a different job. You're not a journalist. You don't qualify even to be a mother.
Wow. Abby.
Mosab, you know, it's usually a public figure. If they were caught lying about half the things that they said, they would be completely discredited and never allowed airtime. You are spewing such ahistorical anti-Arab bigotry that not even the fringe of Israeli society would agree with you. I mean, not even Israeli historians agree.
Sir, I'm not anti-Arab. I am Arab. I am Arab. This is my ethnicity.
Sir.
Islam is just
anti-Muslim bigotry.
I am not a Muslim.
Mosab.
We are Arabs.
Mosab. Okay. Then anti-Muslim bigotry, which is frankly appalling considering that there's a billion people on the planet who would be characterized as you as, you know, extremists who need to be used force against, according to you. But Mosab, not even Israeli historians would agree with the fact that you claim that there's no military occupation in the West Bank, that there's no apartheid state. Israelis at least admit, yes, those things exist, but here's why they're necessary and justified. They don't even agree with you. You're so fringe that I don't even know where you're coming from. I mean, so again, if we can't even agree with the basic facts of the conflict and the reality in front of our eyes, I don't know how we can really even discuss this.
What's that?
Yeah, because you don't qualify.
Well, I think the belittling her credentials. Listen, well, everyone's entitled to an opinion.
Listen, Piers, best case scenario, if there is an occupation, it's between Israel and Jordan, or it's between Israel and Egypt. Because it was not an occupation of a country called Palestine. There was never Palestine in history. This is not an absurd statement. It's reality. Palestine never existed. It was not a country. It was not a nation. It's not an ethnic group. We are Arabs. We are the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. And when I was born, like millions of Palestinians, we had Jordanian birth certificate. The people of Gaza were Egyptian with Egyptian birth certificate. There was no Palestine. Yasser Arafat created this entity, and everybody believed him. And this lie must die. This is why I don't like what Abby and her likes doing by trying to delegitimize Israel. She's trying to discredit me. Who gave you the authority? How dare you?
You are a
I'm a
spy.
son of that region.
You're
I'm
a spy for Israeli
conflict.
intelligence,
You
Mosab.
It is not funny. It's not funny. Your tale,
it's
your
not
false
funny at
narrative
all.
need to stop because you are creating chaos. Listen, Abby, you are bringing chaos to the United States and you will be held accountable. You are just a criminal like them.
Sure. Okay, Mosab, you can't be taken seriously and you're not legitimate because you are literally, you have worked for Israeli intelligence to out your own people. But listen,
sooner
but Mosab,
or later
you can't discredit my reality as well. You can't discredit my reality as well. I was in the West Bank. I had assault rifles pointed at my head from a 17-year-old American from Palo Alto. That's an occupation.
You are in my domain right now.
That's a military occupation.
Okay, you are in my domain. When you come to my domain, you have to pay respect. You have to respect all the effort that I put to save human lives, and you cannot reduce that into some propaganda because
why on earth would I respect you for putting the leader of Fatah, Mosab? You put the most unifying, popular Palestinian figure. You are credited to putting him in prison. This is someone who would win an election against Hamas. He is a peace activist. He was fighting for a two-state solution. This isn't about Hamas, and you know it. This is about you shutting down, tamping down on all factions of Palestinian society. And let's be clear, what is Palestine supposed to do? What are Palestinians supposed to do when in 2018, thousands of Palestinians in Gaza marched peacefully to this fortified perimeter fence that Israeli snipers have authorized themselves to shoot to kill? And that's exactly what they did. They massacred over 200 peaceful demonstrators, medics, press, journalists, clearly marked press, disabled people in wheelchairs, and children. These are all violations of international law and the Geneva Convention. Israeli snipers perched up behind sand dunes picked people off one by one in a methodical slaughter over the course of several months. That's when Palestinians tried to peacefully protest. So I think the question should be, what should Palestinians do? Because they're not even allowed to advocate for their legal rights. They're not even allowed to raise up a Palestinian flag. I visited a place called Sebastia in the occupied West Bank, and Palestinians were shot and in the hospital for simply erecting a Palestinian flag on a hilltop several days prior. This is the brutal reality of military occupation in the West Bank, Mosab. I mean, I want the violence to end. I empathize with the victims of both sides of this. And that's why I want to get to the root of the conflict. Yes, I don't go out there and say Jews can't be trusted like you say about Muslims. I empathize with all civilian life. I believe and cherish the sanctity of human life. And that's why I want to get to the root of why violence occurs, Mosab. And
let me ask Mosab a question. Do you agree with the principle that Palestinians should be entitled to exactly the same human rights as Israelis?
Listen, the suffering of the Arabians, again, stop calling them Palestinians. They are not Palestinians. We are Arabs. We are the Arabs of Judea and Samaria. And Israel and the Jewish people have no problem
Palestinians call themselves
since the beginning of their state. Well, you gave them that name. You forced the international community and the rest of the world.
All right, well, let me rephrase the question. Should the people who live in Gaza and on the West Bank, should they be entitled to the same human rights as Israelis?
If they have equal responsibility as the decent citizens of the State of Israel, that includes Arabs, Jews, Christians, and all other citizens of the State of Israel, then yes, they have equal rights. But if they are not taking their responsibility, if they are using violence, sending suicide bombers, and killing babies, kidnapping a 1-year-old, you know, how do you answer to the mother and to the mothers of the hostages and all those who got killed on October 7? You know, it's very easy to just try to delegitimize Israel. This is what Abby and her likes have been trying to do for so long. But they don't have the moral power to say what Hamas did, all the waves of suicide bombing attacks. October 7, that was a genocide. That was a genocide. So stop spreading the false narrative. Now, regarding to the Arabs who live there, they need a decent police force. They need a good economy. They need good education. And if they are able to integrate, then naturally could be a political entity based on their needs. But right now, when she say Palestine, who is? Islamic Jihad, Fatah, Marwan Barghouthi, Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas, Public Front. They are so conflicted. They don't have agenda. They don't have leadership. They don't have legitimacy. This is an anarchy that has been going on for about 70 years. And it's about time for it to stop. Now, to transform, to integrate the society, we must protect the children. And this is a priority number one before we talk about Palestinian state or whatever name you want to give it. That when we have a savage group, Islamists, by the name of Allah, hijacking and using children as human shields, their own children, after killing Jewish children, then this is a capital crime. We cannot blind our eyes. We have to deal with priorities. First, we remove this savage group out of power. If Abi's intention were pro-peace, then this is our intention, that we should unify our efforts toward this main goal, first goal, priorities. Then after that, we can talk about the future. And this criminal you call Marwan Barghouthi in Israeli prison.
How are you supposed to differentiate who is and who is not Hamas when Israeli authorities have literally called almost every entity in Gazan society Hamas, including UNRWA? They even are calling students on college campuses Hamas. I mean, there's summary executions of doctors thrown in mass graves. because they're called Hamas. So I'm sorry that this label has been rendered completely meaningless. And as far as the term human shields, look, there's been no evidence, according to Amnesty International, during Cast-led and the 2014 onslaught and today. I mean, there is absolutely no evidence provided that Hamas uses human shields and that somehow justifies this heinous slaughter of predominantly women and children in Gaza. And even if they were literally standing behind hostages, you still can't just kill hundreds of people in a single airstrike because a Hamas commander is right there. And that's exactly what Israel is admittedly doing. Through AI, they're saying that they could kill up to 100 civilians for every Hamas official. It's absolutely outlandish.
But if a group like Hamas launches a terrorist attack on Israel that kills 1,200 people, they take over 200 more people hostage, including babies and Holocaust survivors, that is a declaration of war, which they knew would lead to the kind of response we've seen from Israel. And Israel would argue, and they would have some sound argument to this, that if someone declares war on you in that manner and you respond, and in eliminating the terrorists who committed that heinous crime, civilian casualties are incurred, they would say that that is exactly what has happened in any other war in history, that the principle is the same, that the civilian loss of life is appalling, but that the principle of retaliating against a body of people who have committed one of the worst terror attacks in living memory, that is why they're doing it.
Piers, there's no symmetry between the two sides. It's complete asymmetrical mass slaughter of women and kids. You know that.
Well,
and
actually,
you could also
Hamas
make the
did
same
commit a
argument for
mass
what
slaughter
preempted.
of women and kids. They did.
But
you said there's no symmetry.
But Piers,
there's an absolute symmetry.
But there's no symmetry. There's no symmetry between an occupying, colonizing force and the people that they're occupying and colonizing. You could obviously make the same argument that preempted October 7th, that it was a declaration of war to siege Gaza, to prevent aid from getting in, to shoot people that stray too far out, that are fishing, that can't go get medical aid and are sentenced to death within Gaza. Is that not a declaration of war? Is it not a declaration of war to violate international law, to maintain a brutal fascist military dictatorship in the West Bank? These all preempted October 7th. So it just keeps going back and back to what is the root of actual violence, Piers.
Okay, Mosab, I'll give the last word to you. Where do we get peace from all this hell?
Listen, naturally, if the Israeli protocol is not sufficient and it's not satisfactory to the expectations of Abby and many of her friends, then I say, how about we punish Hamas by their own laws, by the Islamic law? Why don't we follow the Islamic protocol? In this case, the Islamic law says, behead all men and take all women and children as booty. This is their moral stand. So she say it's asymmetric. Well, we already know that. It's a very dirty war. We are dealing with people with the mentality of the 7th century tribalism. It's not an easy mission for a democracy, for any country, for any modern army, for any civilized society to deal with this. So we need to be reasonable. I understand if people are anti-war and they are pro-children, pro-life, me too. But sometimes we have to make very difficult choices. And Israel was really pushed to the corner. Israel is fighting for its very existence. I am fighting for my very existence. I did not kill any Arab. I did not kill any of their tribesmen. But they want me to cease to exist. Why? Because I criticize their religion. I criticize their stupid ideas that are leading towards global chaos. And instead of spreading the narrative, the victim narrative, what we need to do actually, we need to localize it, not globalize it. And we need to be reasonable of our expectations from a democracy in the middle of crisis.